Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Ambassador's Lounge. In the first episode with my colleagues, Ambassador Imran Yawar and Riaz Bukhari, we discussed about the climate change and its dangers to Pakistan. But now, in this session, I have again the privilege to indulge in the discussion with Aisha Khan, our prominent environmentalist. She doesn't need any introduction. And with me is Ayaz Khan, who will be also bothering Aisha Khan about the climate change. And here we intend to take up the issues about the region, because it's just not Pakistan that we may be the culprit, but our share is less than 1% as far as pollution is concerned. India is also one of the major polluters at the global scale. So, and then we happen to share water through Indus Water's treaty system. We have and it's a long history, and that Indus Water Treaty has been holding on since early 60s. But now there are certain questions about Indus Water Treaty, and India is raising certain questions and then also asking us to reopen certain clauses of the Indus Water Treaty. So, we wanted to have a discussion on the region, about the region. It is just not India, but also Afghanistan. It is equally vulnerable and beyond, because China is there, and then we have Bangladesh and South Asian region we can talk about. So welcome, Aisha.
Thank you.
And we are privileged to have you here this evening.
Pleasure is mine.
And I will begin with the Indus Water Treaty. What do you see the fate of this treaty? Because there are many lingering questions about it. Yes.
Right. I think so far the treaty has stood the test of time. So we can say that it's a good treaty, and it has divided waters and rivers, and it has given India and Pakistan the share from the waters that flow from the rivers that come down to us. What we can now talk about is the environmental component, the environmental flows, the climate change aspect, which was not a consideration when the treaty was signed. But I am not in favor of revising the treaty, but perhaps adding additional protocols that can guarantee the environmental flows, that can improve sharing telemetric information for early warning, and working with each other. The reason I say that is that all the waters that flow into Pakistan are transboundary from the Indus River system. We have the Kabul, but the water is very small in quantity. So if we look at the Indus, there are two aspects that we need to take into account. One, that India is the upper riparian, and two, that the flows into the Indus River, because we are a single river, single basin, lower riparian country. The flows of the Indus, unlike the Ganges or the Brahmaputra, rely heavily on snow and glacial melt. So if due to global warming, there is a reduction in the snow and glacial melt, and we have lesser flows, so our intake will reduce at source, and there's nothing you can do about that. The other question is whether India can stop that water if its relationship with Pakistan are not good, and if it wants to use water as a weapon of war. So I think so far, despite some threatening noises that India has made on this issue, there has never been anything that has been done actually to obstruct the flow of water. Pakistan has been receiving its share of water, and if we have lower per capita today as intake, that is largely due to the huge growth in our population size from 37 million to 250 million. So the water per capita has gone down from 5,000 cubic meter to 700 or 960 cubic meter, and the PCRWR says that it's going to go down even further if the consumption patterns continue as the current model. The next thing we need to look at is the use of that water. Is it efficient use of that water? Because if 90% is going for irrigation and crop cultivation, what kind of cropping patterns are we following? If we call ourselves a water scarce country, then should we be engaging in agricultural practices where 4 crops take 80% of the water and give you only 4% GDP in return? So these are questions that we need to ask ourselves on how can we make better use of the water that we have, and also look at the future that I think globally there'll be less availability of water for everyone in the world.
Correct.
So for Pakistan also, if there is less availability, how can we do more with less? And if we have better relationship within the region on hydrology and distribution of water, can we address this issue looking at it from a humanitarian perspective?
Don't you think that Indus Water Treaty, which was signed in 1960, and now it's almost more than 60 years, and it is holding. But at the same time, much development has taken place, especially as far as science is concerned, and telemetry and other issues, which we can, and through scientific methods, we can further improve as far as our water intake is concerned, water management is concerned. And both Pakistan and India, as well as other neighboring countries, they can contribute to that. But unfortunately, right now, SAARC is in a limbo. It hasn't met since 2016 when Pakistan was supposed to host the SAARC summit. And there doesn't seem to be any appetite as far as India is concerned to reconvene the SAARC summit. If that is the case, and then the alarming rate with which environmental degradation is taking place, how do you see, where do we stand actually?
I think we have to navigate this very carefully, because we have to take into account that the upper riparian is always stronger and the position of the lower riparian is always weaker. When it comes to your own survival and need for water, countries and people can go to any extent. So the best way to navigate this is to engage in climate diplomacy. The best way is to try to promote hydro-solidarity for the region and look at it through the lens of human security. Because if India is the upper riparian and it thinks that it can probably exercise more control over the flow of that water, it should also realize that for a large country like Pakistan, it cannot have a bordering country with so much social upheaval.
But won't it be, in fact, violation of the Indus Water Treaty if, say, we accept the argument that India wants to have more control of the water?
I don't think that so far there is any intent on the part of India to violate a treaty. It is a treaty, like I said earlier, that has stood the test of time. So let's not, look at the negative scenarios to generate fear I think controversy by saying that India will violate. If you have better relationship with the country, then perhaps the chances of violation also diminish. So we should be thinking more of trying to improve relationship in a way in which we engage each other, countries and their interests, and move towards a situation where if they try to harm you, they also get harmed in some way. Okay. So we need to think of different mechanisms for engagement.
Ayesha, climate change is affecting the entire planet, and South Asia is also not immune from the changes that are taking place, the devastation that is being caused, because of the climate change. We have seen the phenomenon of flooding, you know, in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan particularly. I would like to ask you that Pakistan being among the 10 top most vulnerable countries in terms of climate change, you know, the high risk countries, do we have any strategy to deal with the impact of these climatic changes to the national security of Pakistan?
I think if you look at Pakistan and its policy landscape, you will find that Pakistan has a climate change policy. It was updated in 2022. If you look at the provinces, every province has its own climate change policy. We have an adaptation policy, we have a disaster risk reduction policy, and all these policies are very carefully crafted because they include everything that needs to be covered in a policy to make it comprehensive. But the reason we face a crisis is because we've not, for some reason, been able to implement these policies. And we are facing vulnerability after vulnerability because the policies are just sitting on the shelves and not being implemented. So therefore, you know, if you look at the food security policy, the energy policy, the water policy, the climate change policy, all of them have something to do with the national security because they all imperil the human security of Pakistan. So when your human security gets imperiled and your national security also gets compromised. So I think it's very, very important for us to look at this with a broad lens and understand that each sector is inherently integrated with the other sector, and you must take a nexus approach between each one of them, between food, water, energy, disasters, and come up with a policy that promotes integration. So theoretically, all those concepts are there. But let me just say that, you know, climate governance is not a standalone issue. It's part of the overall governance mechanism that we have in the country. And if you see over the last decade, there's been a profound fracturing of political governance in Pakistan. There's been a deep polarization in our society. This has prevented governments from attending to issues of governance and engaging more in firefighting with each other. And that is why the country as a whole has suffered and is paying the price.
आशा कुछ अर्से पहले जो है वो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी बनाई गई थी जिसमें कि नेशनल सिक्योरिटी फ्रेमवर्क जो कोपेनहेगन का था उसको पाकिस्तान के नेशनल सिक्योरिटी फ्रेमवर्क में भी वो इंडक्ट किया गया था। ये एक अच्छा कदम था, लेकिन कुछ अरसे के बाद जो है वो इसकी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में जो है बड़ी रुकावटें आईं। तो अब ये कहा जाता है कि उस नेशनल सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी में क्लाइमेट चेंज और उससे रिलेटेड जितने भी चैलेंजेस थे उनको भी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी में इंडक्ट किया गया था, शामिल किया गया था। What are those factors which have prevented, you know, from implementing this particular strategy?
I think you bring me back to what I said earlier कि हमारी जितनी बाकी policies बनी हैं उसी तरह हमारी एक national security policy भी बनी। उसका जो climate change component था उस पे हमने बैठ के हमारी, जिसका आपने मुझे introduction में बताया था that I was the convener of that group. We had 13 other people and we gave a lot of input of how the national security gets imperiled through the sectoral impacts of climate change on Pakistan. So that was also, you know, in a short paragraph introduced and included in the policy. The policy also said that Pakistan is going to shift focus from geopolitics to geoeconomics. ये सब कुछ कहने के बाद किसी चीज़ पे आगे काम नहीं हुआ इतना ज़्यादा. And that is the reason why we have an issue, a crisis of governance in the country, that after making policies, we don't have a very structured approach to say how do we follow through. We say we want to do this, but we don't say how we will do this and who will do this. There is no accountability in this governance mechanism, and that is the fundamental challenge that we face. We need more equity, I think, we need more transparency, we need more accountability at every level. Once you create that, you will start having a more functional system where systemic functions perform, and they're not performing right now. If you look at any sector, if you go to the education sector, the health sector, the agriculture sector, the water sector, we've had so many debates and discussions and seminars and roundtables, and you have a host of policy recommendations for the government on what needs to be done. So the government knows what needs to be done, but the political will to do that is missing.
Aisha, if I may now again intervene, and that's we talked about India, Pakistan, and both countries are actually water stressed, but with regard to both the countries, there are, and we have at least we have a blessing in disguise in the form of Indus Water Treaty. At least we have a framework. And when you have a framework, so there are chances that you are going to implement that. And I think the history of frameworks which exist between Pakistan, say on nuclear installations, exchange of notes, despite all tensions, we have been doing that. We have been involving each other on certain issues. For instance, the DGMOs are in contracts. So now this is actually a veritable threat to both the countries, and for which we don't have to fight each other. In fact, we have to fight with the nature. Like we have in Siachen, we are not fighting, the two troops of the two countries are not fighting. They are fighting against the nature, against the hazards of the weather. So keeping that in view, and then all those challenges that we have, you think that there is some appetite from India and also Pakistan to engage each other on climate issues, on environmental issues?
From what I have seen, I think definitely in the last few years there seems to be an appetite from Pakistan, and I think overtures have been made to say that we need to engage, we need to talk, we're open to discuss. From the Indian side there's been a pushback, but I think things might change now. After the elections in India, I think there's a realization also that that agenda which they were taking forward, which was very belligerent, which was very hostile, may not pay long-term dividends. And if you have to take a neighbor-first approach, then you have to look at Pakistan, which is a sizable country, which is an important country in the region, and you cannot ignore and say it's irrelevant, we do not need to engage with you. There was a World Bank report a few years back that said that South Asia is warming more rapidly than the rest of the world. It also said that there are about 800 million people that are at risk of living in hot spots who will leave that area and move out. So when you have such large and massive movements of people, it disrupts economies on both sides. And nobody wants a neighborhood in turmoil. So I think it's in India's larger interest also to understand that they cannot have a Pakistan that is socially and politically fractured, because that will mean a lot of trouble in their neighborhood. So India will probably now start looking at it differently as well. Pakistan is already inclined to engage in ways that increase cash flows for Pakistan, that increase revenue systems for Pakistan, that decreases tension in the neighborhood and allows the country to focus more on its economic stability and growth.
I remember when I was Director UN and then subsequently as Director General UN, and it's long ago, around, lastly it was 2011, on environmental issues, India and Pakistan used to have by and large common causes, and then we used to make common stand, but I haven't seen that subsequently, whether it was COP 27, 28, and I think now we'll have in Azerbaijan next month, COP 29. And why this drifting while this threat is actually staring us in the eyes?
I think it's because when politically you move away and there are more tensions between countries instead of movements towards conciliation, collaboration, cooperation, this happens. it's natural. If you're hostile towards someone, then these things happen. And in the last past 2-3 elections in India, the trend has been very negative towards Pakistan. But one hopes that, people and countries go through certain phases and then they realize that this is not a workable agenda, that the best way to address a common threat is through shared solutions. And we need to look at this through the regional lens, because we are connected by land, by air, by water. And unless we manage all these issues together, no country alone within the region will be able to address this. And especially countries that share borders have to work closely with each other. So I think it's imperative that India and Pakistan decide to decouple politics from other engagements on climate change which threaten human security, and agree on some kind of a framework of cooperation.
I think, yes, you have a point. And then Ayaz, you have...
well, I would again would like to draw your attention to the specific problems that Pakistan have, in terms of climate security, and that is that we have read, that IPCC report, of a few years ago, said that about 2.7% increase in flooding, and 5.6% increase in heat-related disasters, would take place. And Pakistan is, as I said, is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world. This naturally challenges the national cohesion, because the floods, or the migration, internal migration, or climate refugees that take place in Pakistan, the urbanization, or let's say the economic challenges that emerge after the floods, have taken place or whatsoever, they impinge upon the very roots of Pakistan's security. Now, are you in a position to suggest to the government as to what strategies should be adopted, to actually address these challenges, which are likely to increase in future as well?
And if I may add to that, are you satisfied with the water management system in the country?
I think that, we need to have a serious conversation between the different line ministries, between the center and the provinces. Because right now, all the issues that are discussed, on which they say there has been consultation, frankly, I feel the consultation is not broad-based, and it is not comprehensive. It is just a tokenistic thing to say we have consulted with the provinces. But if you do not take the provinces on board and discuss every single issue with them, then this agenda will not move forward. And it is threatening, I think, the social fabric of Pakistan.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
it is unraveling us little by little.
Absolutely.
Climate change is a new factor, but if we go to the IMF the 23rd time, have we been going there because of climate change? No. We have been going there because we have not governed ourselves properly. So I think there's a lot of responsibility that we need to take, and we need to look at how we have conducted our domestic policy and our regional policy, and then plot an alternative trajectory to say, how can we change things that will give us a different outcome? And then decide where do we want to go. Because if you want to take certain risks and you say it is worthwhile for us to stay the course and continue with business as usual, then that's an informed decision that you're making. But if you say that is no longer tenable for us and we need to shift course, then what are those actions? And because there has been so much public opinion with diverse feedback from different parties, from different provinces, from different actors on political issues, on economic issues. It's very important to build that consensus on what should be the course correction that Pakistan needs to take. Because it's not possible just to decide unilaterally sitting in Islamabad to say this is what our new policy will be. You need to get the ownership and buy-in from all your stakeholders. And that process needs to begin very quickly, because we do need a change in the way we need to engage
in the
with
attitude
the world.
as well.
Because, you know, when we talk about adaptation and climate change, it is not just adapting to different sectoral food, energy, water policies. It is also about the process of evolution. It is also about behavior, thinking, and positioning. So geopolitically, we see people are changing, and those who don't change and keep pace with time are left behind. And we are being left behind. So there's a lot of catching up that we need to do. And sometimes, you know, we forget that certain things do not require money and financial investments. Certain things can be done by changing your approaches. And I'll give you a few examples over here. For example, this year's gender parity report, the ranking of Pakistan is 145 out of 146.
Correct.
Now, we don't need money to give equality to women. It's a social thing. We have not moved the needle on that as much as we should have, otherwise our ranking would not be so dismal. If you look at the human capital index of Pakistan, Pakistan is again at the bottom. If you look at the rate of stunting in Pakistan, it is very high. So when you have these issues, you have to address them, because if you have not invested in your human capital, how can you expect that population to give you ideas, innovative ideas, and deal with the new challenges that require a better understanding of science and technology. So you have to invest in your education, you have to invest in women, you have to reduce your population growth rate, and you have to improve your governance. And for all these things within the funds that you have or that are available to you, you can do a lot better than what we have done so far.
You're so right, Aisha, and then these are issues so interlinked that you cannot even prioritize. You know, you have to give equal priority to all the issues, whether it's your population planning or control, or whatever we may like to call it, and then water conservation itself, because we should in fact have learned lessons of 2022 floods, and if the estimates are correct, we suffered almost $30 billion worth of losses, and we haven't recovered yet from that damage. But still, do you think, I don't see at least awareness, whether in the government circles or among the people, that how to go about it?
You did talk about, you know, water management. So we have the water management policy, and I think it was made in 2018, if I'm not wrong. After that, the provinces were supposed to develop the master plans in six different sectoral areas. To this day, that has not taken place.
This capacity of the provinces also is a big issue. For instance, 1/3 of Balochistan was underwater, while it's the largest province of Pakistan. And the sheer incompetence and the lack of expertise and capabilities that province suffered. At times you have a Mirani Dam which is dry, and then once it is flooded, it is overflowing, and then it is causing havoc in our Makran division. Same is true about our hilly areas, whether it is Takatu or Koi Mordar and other Koi Solomon range and all that. It is taking place. So this is just not Pakistan. I mean, you go elsewhere in Pakistan where we have these problems of water management. It is very much, and it is becoming acute with the passage of time. I think, and then to top it all, if we are going to grapple with the problem from India being upper riparian state, I think it is quite a scary scenario.
It is scary, but you know, if you look at your water and you see 90% goes for agriculture, and then you look at what kind of cropping patterns you're following, and you have a food security policy that tells you that you need to change your cropping patterns, and you do nothing about it. The agroecological zoning was not done for the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years or maybe more. So you have to align things and do it in a scientific manner. like I said, the policies tell you what need to be done. The water management policy addresses the issues not just of transboundary, but of water distribution within the country as well. But we are not following the recommendations that are given. We are not doing what is written in the policy framework.
Correct.
So if we make policies and we don't follow it, and there's no accountability at any level, then you have the kind of challenges that we are facing, and they will keep getting more and more serious as time goes by, because as the water quantity shrinks, and our groundwater reserves are almost near depletion, because we've extracted more water than we have replenished, and we still don't have a groundwater regulatory framework.
Correct. Yes.
Only the last remark. मुझे ऐसा महसूस होता है आयशा कि हम ऑब्सेस्ड हैं मिलिट्री सिक्योरिटी के मामले में, ज़्यादा एम्फेसिस है हमारा, और क्लाइमेट सिक्योरिटी जो है वो कोई जैसे सेकेंडरी चीज़ है या बैक बर्नर पे है। क्या कोई ऐसी पॉसिबिलिटी है कि आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो है वो अगर सजेस्ट करे कि मिलिट्री और क्लाइमेट सिक्योरिटी को जो है वो कंबाइन करके जो है वो कोई पाकिस्तान के लिए कोई एक वायबल जो है वो सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी जो है वो बनाई जाए, जिससे कि दोनों इश्यूज को एड्रेस किया जा सके?
आई थिंक जो ट्रेडिशनल आपके थ्रेट्स हैं, दोज आर डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द नॉन ट्रेडिशनल थ्रेट्स. सो and the military will be engaged, as you have seen in the past. Whenever we have a disaster, it is the military that comes to the forefront to manage your disasters, to provide relief.
HADR जो है वो
सारी जो चीज़ें होती हैं, तो उनका रोल वैसे भी enhance होगा even in climate change. But I think they're very cognizant of the fact that the non-traditional threats that come from sectors like climate change are very, very critical and important. The only problem is that, we are just not paying serious attention to performance. I think we are living in a very dangerous time, perhaps the most dangerous in human history, where the future has never been more uncertain. So nobody at this time should be making misleading statements that are based on rhetorical assumptions of delusion. Our aspirations should not be delusional, and they should not give people this false sense of security. We have to be very realistic, and we have to start educating the people on what is at risk. If you look at your education system, it does not give people cognizant awareness. It is rote learning that we promote. And people often say that we spend only such a small fraction of our budget on health or education, but my question to them always is, whatever money that we have, are we spending it well enough? Because I work in rural areas, in rural communities, and I see half the schools in the rural areas where government teachers don't go.
They don't exist.
The dispensers don't go. The medical officers don't go. They sit in the city centers and they do other jobs and they draw different salaries.
And draw their salaries,
Nobody questions them. Those children, those people, those communities are deprived of their fundamental rights. So the state has to, I think, step forward to make sure that whatever budget is being given for those sectors is actually being spent. And within that, you can improve. You can improve the quality of education that you're giving with the resources that you have. So this is just an excuse to say that, we are not spending enough on development. And if you have the wrong development priorities which have got you into a debt trap, then you will forever be caught in that debt trap. Your circular debt will continue to mount, and every year you'll be borrowing more to pay off your debts and not spend on your development. So you have to break that vicious cycle.
Aisha, a final question from my side, and that's about how can the Foreign Office and our missions abroad can support our climate change efforts? What is your advice?
Very good question. When Jalil Abbas Jilani Sahab was the foreign minister, I actually wrote a whole paper and I gave it to him. saying that the foreign missions abroad that are already established entities and are functional can play a very important role. They can engage with the host governments, because these climate summits that take place once a year are not where things are decided. Climate diplomacy has to be an ongoing engagement with the host countries. Number two, they can engage more with the local diaspora and start mobilizing resources. They can start engaging with the academia in those countries, and based on whichever geographical areas they're located in, for example, if we're talking about polar issues, polar ice, then those academics should be put in touch with our universities over here. They can start becoming the facilitators for bringing people together to exchange knowledge and best practices. And they can actually engage with the local diaspora. I think that is very important.
Okay.
And I keep saying that do not rely only on the Green Climate Fund, the GCF, as
Correct.
external finance to get the money. Start looking for alternative pathways to generate that finance. And with your diaspora over there, with so many embassies that are already there, I think if each one of them decides to engage in that and raise revenue and resources for Pakistan, it will contribute towards the climate fund that we want to establish under the Climate Authority.
Thank you, Aisha. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the discussion, and Aisha Khan, no doubt, I mean, I stand educated, and I'm sure you would have benefited from her wisdom. There are serious issues as far as climate and environment is concerned we are facing. We are all facing, and we are facing it together. Irrespective where our boundaries begin and where our boundaries end, but whether it is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, or the surrounding countries, we have to work together, because environment is a subject, climate is a subject, which will not look at our bilateral enmities or adversarial relationship. For them, it is how we take care of ourselves and our environment that is very important. Thank you so much. Keep watching. See you next time.